Chapter 6. My First True Friend. The turmoil of war had turned Stormride Castle into a whirlwind of activity and tension. Rumors and uncertainty filled every corner, and Lyanna felt the weight of worry in every glance, in every whisper. The Duke Eden Stormride, her feared stepfather, was heading to the capital of the East to organize the army and coordinate war strategies against the West. His departure had given Lyanna an opportunity she could not waste. Around midday, escorted by 2 guards to the dining hall, Lyanna listened intently to their conversation about a potential battle on one of the strategic islands between the 2 continents.
I've heard the battle on Golden Sands Beach won't be the only one. The West plans to launch a decisive attack on the Isle of Entremar.
The volcanic island represents a peaceful pact that the West and the East made more than 300 years ago. The island belongs to the East, and if they attack the Isle of Entremar, it's because they'll want to use it for future naval battles.
Taking advantage of the soldiers' distraction, who were absorbed in their military discussions, Lyanna devised a plan. She possessed a hidden power, a gift she had kept secret since she was a child. She could communicate with and control animals, a talent that could be her salvation at that moment. As they passed through a hallway where the windows were open for cleaning, Lyanna closed her eyes and focused. Sending out a silent call, she summoned the nearby birds. Within seconds, a flock of birds appeared, flapping and chirping noisily around the guards, creating the chaos she needed to escape.
What's going on?
Shouted one guard as he tried to fend off the birds clawing at his face. Taking advantage of the confusion, Lyanna ran to the first door she saw, which led to the castle garden. Her heart pounded as she hurried through the garden paths, her footsteps echoing on the stone pavement. She could hear the guards shouting behind her, but the birds she controlled continued to distract them, buying Lyanna time to widen the gap. She ran as if her life depended on it, feeling the fresh air on her face and the solid ground beneath her feet. At last, she reached the wall surrounding the castle, an imposing obstacle she needed to overcome. As she prepared to find a way to climb it, the sound of hurried footsteps grew closer. Lyanna turned quickly, fearing the guards had caught up with her. To her surprise, it wasn't soldiers she encountered, but her stepbrother, Henry. The 8-year-old boy looked at her with a mix of worry and determination in his eyes. He approached Lyanna as she nervously glanced around, searching for an escape.
What are you doing, Lyanna?
His voice trembled but was filled with curiosity. Lyanna, with a mix of desperation and resolve in her gaze, replied,
I'm sorry, Henry, but I can't take it anymore. Every day, I feel like I'm suffocating, unable to breathe, as if my cage grows smaller and its bars tighten around me, preventing any movement. I can't stand it, Henry. I need to leave this place. I don't belong here, I'm not part of your family, and you know your parents can't stand me. I'm just the girl they had to take out of honor and respect for my mother, the Lady of the Pearl Islands.
Henry looked at her with understanding eyes, and despite being only 8 years old, he deeply grasped what his stepsister was trying to convey.
I feel trapped sometimes too. My father is always busy with Rogan, training my brother to become the heir to his duchy. He doesn't even look at me, and when he does, it's only to tell me how disappointed he is in me.
He confessed, lowering his voice to a whisper.
And when I feel completely ignored, sometimes I sneak out through a gap in the wall surrounding the castle.
Lyanna's eyes lit up with hope.
Where is that gap, Henry?
Henry nodded resolutely and pointed to a spot not far from where they stood.
It's right there, behind those bushes. It's a small hole, but I always manage to squeeze through.
Without wasting a second, Lyanna leaned in and hugged her stepbrother tightly.
Thank you, Henry. I'll never forget this. I want you to know you're the best in your horrid family, and you should never feel like you're worthless.
Then, she quickly headed to the spot he had pointed out, her heart pounding. When she reached the gap, she carefully pushed aside the bushes hiding the hole in the wall. It was narrow, but enough for her to pass through. With determination, she slid through the hole and finally escaped Stormride Castle, leaving behind the restrictions that had oppressed her for so long. Once outside, Lyanna began to run, her footsteps echoing over the forest's fallen leaves. The trees stood tall and majestic around her, their branches forming a protective canopy overhead. As she moved forward, The fresh air filled her lungs, and the birdsong accompanied her journey. She ran without stopping, driven by the euphoria of her newfound freedom. Soon, her sprint turned into a brisk walk, and her steps gradually slowed as time passed. With a smile on her lips, Lyanna began to hum a song that had lived in her heart for years.
La isla perlada el sol la baña y el cielo brilla con un nuevo día. Mi amor nunca meré, hielo se disuelve antes que el sol despierte su llamarada fría. Susurra la noche cuentos de antaño, cantan los árboles versos de papel.
It was the same melody her biological mother used to sing to her every night before bed or when they cuddled by the beach where they had lived. Her mother had passed away when she was only 8 years old, but the song had remained with her as a treasured keepsake, an eternal bond with the woman who had loved her so much. Lyanna's voice resonated softly among the trees, and the words of the song flowed naturally. As she sang, she felt a deep connection to her mother, as if she were walking beside her in those moments. The melody was simple but laden with meaning, each note evoking warm memories and joyful moments they had shared. Hours passed as Lyanna wandered through the dense forest. Though she began to feel tired and hungry, the feeling of joy was so strong that she pressed on, determined to keep going despite the challenges. She knew the Madeira forest was a vast, sparsely inhabited region, and it might be days before she found a village. The sunlight filtered through the foliage, creating a play of shadows and light on the forest floor. Finally, as the rays of the setting sun bathed the surroundings in a warm golden glow, Lyanna heard a sound that made her stop abruptly. A low, guttural growl echoed among the trees. Lyanna turned toward the sound, her heart racing as she imagined a wicked beast stalking her, ready to devour her. But her eyes met a creature far different from what she had expected. Standing in the middle of the path was a cub, its black, shiny coat gleaming, the size of a large dog, with yellow eyes that sparkled with a mix of curiosity and distrust. Lyanna's terrified expression softened slightly as she realized she wasn't facing an immediate threat but rather the cub of an unknown species. The cub, with its sturdy body and pointed ears, stood its ground, observing her with an intensity that almost seemed human. Intrigued by the creature, Lyanna approached slowly, her steps soft and cautious to avoid scaring it. As she got closer, the cub didn't back away, but its eyes followed her every movement with watchful wariness. Lyanna knelt at a safe distance and gently extended a hand, attempting to stroke the furry face of the animal. But the cub let out a low, threatening growl, baring its small, sharp teeth. Immediately, Lyanna pulled back, raising her hands in a gesture of peace.
I don't want to hurt you, beautiful.
She murmured, trying to soothe the cub. The animal held its defensive stance for a few more seconds, but then, as if sensing the sincerity in Lyanna's eyes, it stopped growling and relaxed its tense body slightly. Despite the initial distrust, there was something in the animal's gaze that resonated with Lyanna. They shared an undeniable truth. They were both alone and lost in a world they didn't fully understand. Lyanna, seeing the loneliness reflected in the creature's yellow eyes, spoke to it again, her voice soft and calming.
What are you doing here, beautiful? Where's your mom or dad? Are you alone, just like me?
Her words seemed to linger in the forest's tranquil air, and for a moment, the cub tilted its head as if trying to understand the questions. The cub, a mix between a tiger and a wolf, let out a small growl, but this time it wasn't threatening. It was more of a communicative sound, a response to Lyanna's question. Although she couldn't grasp the exact meaning of the growl, Lyanna felt as though the creature was telling her it was alone too. Lyanna studied the cub, its black fur glinting in the last rays of the setting sun.
Have you also run away from your old home to find a place where you belong?
She asked, knowing she wouldn't receive a verbal reply but feeling that the animal somehow understood her. The cub stepped a bit closer, its distrust slowly fading. Lyanna extended her hand again, moving with calculated slowness. This time, the cub didn't growl. Instead, it allowed Lyanna's fingers to brush against its head, feeling the warmth and softness of its fur. A silent connection was established between them, a kind of mutual understanding that needed no words. Lyanna looked at the pup with a sad smile on her lips.
I'm lost and alone too. I have no one, not since.
She swallowed hard, discreet tears clouding her blue eyes.
Since I lost my mother on the shores of the Pearl Islands.
She confessed, whispering as though fearing her words might break the spell of the moment.
I was adopted months after my mother passed. The Duke who took me in is horrible and always looks down on me. I've spent years trying to understand why, and although I haven't found a clear answer, I think he simply doesn't like me.
Lyanna bit her lip, trying to stop the tears streaming down her face. Unexpectedly, she felt a warm, sticky tongue gently wiping away her tears. Lyanna gazed intently at the pup as it comforted her with its affectionate actions. The red-haired girl smiled and stroked the animal more tenderly.
Thank you,
she whispered as the pup slowly moved back and looked her in the eyes.
The Duke's castle is a horrible place. He kept me locked up, trapped under his dark will. I ran away because all I want is to be free, to feel the wind on my skin and to walk without being watched. I want freedom, not just to see the world through the bars of a carefully crafted cage.
Her words seemed to strike the pup, whose intense yellow gaze focused intently on what Lyanna was saying. The 12-year-old girl, who had always felt a special connection with animals, noticed that this pup was different. Its spirit seemed untamed, a wild, free force that resonated with her own desire for freedom. The pup, taking cautious steps, moved closer to Lyanna. It rested its head on her knee and, after a moment of hesitation, began rubbing its furry face against her, emitting a soft and comforting purr, like a cat feeling at ease with its owner. Lyanna chuckled softly, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. She stroked the pup again, running her fingers through its soft black fur. The animal didn't pull away. Instead, it seemed to enjoy the touch, closing its eyes and purring even louder.
Do you have a name?
Lyanna asked, looking at the pup with curiosity. The animal raised its head and met her gaze with its expressive yellow eyes, filled with remarkable intelligence. Lyanna immediately understood that the pup didn't have a name, or at least not one she could comprehend.
Everyone needs a name. Without it, what would we be? Our name gives us identity, a value we all have the right to possess.
Lyanna said thoughtfully. She observed the pup closely, trying to find something that captured its essence. The animal's bright yellow gaze reminded her of the moon, and its fierce, brave spirit made her think of passion and strength. After pondering for a while, an idea came to her mind.
Lunargido.
She finally said.
I'll call you Lunargido. Luna, for your eyes that shine like the full moon, and Fervid, for your brave and fiery spirit.
The pup perked up its ears and wagged its tail, as if approving the name. Lyanna laughed again and petted its head, feeling that, somehow, they had sealed a bond.
Lunargido.
Lyanna repeated, testing how the name sounded. However, the red-haired girl frowned, as though something didn't quite feel right. She looked at the pup with a smile. The animal wagged its tail, its face showing an innocence that contrasted with the imposing name.
I think I'd rather call you Lunar,
she said softly.
Lunargido sounds too fierce, and I know you're more than strength and ferocity. Your name should represent all your virtues, not just the most imposing ones.
Lunar, as if perfectly understanding, growled in agreement, his eyes shining with a spark of approval. Without warning, Lunar leapt toward Lyanna, his black, furry body colliding with hers and knocking her to the ground. Lyanna let out a gasp of surprise followed by a laugh as Lunar licked her face with overflowing joy. The 12-year-old girl, who had spent so much time feeling lonely and trapped, now found herself laughing on the forest floor, her face covered in friendly licks from her new companion.
Stop it, Lunar,
she exclaimed between laughter, trying to shield her face with her hands. But the puppy seemed determined to show her all his affection, and her attempts to escape his licks only made Lyanna laugh harder. After a few minutes of play, Lunar finally calmed down, sitting beside Lyanna with his tongue hanging out and a satisfied expression on his face. Lyanna, still laughing, sat up and petted the puppy head.
Thank you. I needed someone to listen and understand me,
she began, her eyes shining with joy as she looked at Lunar.
You know, I've never had a friend. Before I went to live at Stormride Castle, my mother and I lived in a small castle near the beach. We had servants who cleaned our home and brought us food, but I never really had a friend. It was just my mother and me, and now that she's gone.
Lyanna's gaze dropped to the ground, and sadness clouded her face again. However, the young girl shook her head and tried to keep a smile on her lips.
Would you like to be my best and only friend?
She asked, her voice full of a hope she hadn't felt in a long time. The connection she felt with Lunar was something she couldn't quite explain. She had spent years feeling like a stranger in a home where she didn't belong, surrounded by people who despised her and kept her locked away. But now, here in the forest with Lunar, she felt she had finally found someone who understood her, someone with whom she could share her longing for freedom. Lunar, as if he could sense her thoughts, snuggled closer to her, his soft fur offering her comfort. Lyanna stayed silent for a moment, savoring the company of her new friend. The forest around her was a haven of peace, far from the confinement and constant watchfulness of Stormride Castle. As the afternoon waned and the sun began to set on the horizon, Lyanna realized she needed to find a safe place to spend the night. Though the forest was beautiful and liberating, it could also be dangerous, especially for a young girl on her own.
We need to find somewhere to sleep, Lunar,
she said, standing up and brushing the dirt from her clothes.
I don't want to go back to the castle, but we can't stay out here in the open either.
Lunar sprang to his feet, as if he understood the urgency in Lyanna's voice. The girl started walking, following the puppy, who seemed to know where to find shelter for the night. Lunar led her to a small cave hidden among dense bushes. It seemed like a good place to spend the night, protected from the elements and well concealed enough to keep them safe.
Is this your home?
Lyanna asked as she stepped into the cave, exploring it. There were traces of gnawed bones and dried blood scattered in one area of the floor. But other than that, it was small and cozy, and she felt relieved to find it.
Thank you for letting me sleep in your house.
Lunar growled softly and followed Lyanna into the cave. Together, they settled in for the night. Lyanna curled up next to her new friend, using his warm body as a pillow. Though fear and uncertainty still lingered in her mind, the comfort of having Lunar by her side gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. As the sun set and night fell over the forest, Lyanna closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest. With Lunar by her side, she felt braver and more determined than ever. For the first time, she had hoped that her life could change, that she could find the freedom and happiness she so desperately longed for. And so, under the starry sky and the protection of the small cave, Lyanna and Lunar shared their first night together, a night that would spark a deep and unbreakable friendship. The 12-year-old girl and the moon-eyed puppy were about to embark on a journey that would change their lives forever, forged by an indestructible bond and an unyielding determination.